Welcome back to Blacklit Memory. Tonight, we're staying in, but not for comfort. These are stories of nights spent alone, too far from town, too deep in the hills, or just a little too close to the wrong door. You'll meet the ones who heard movement under the floor, who saw their reflection walk away, who stayed indoors and still weren't alone. If stories like these make you double-check your locks before bed, consider subscribing. Share this with someone who sleeps light. And let us know in the comments, where are you listening from and who else is home with you tonight? Now keep the lights low and don't answer if someone knocks. The drive up to the cabin had taken me past where the salt trucks stopped, past any last little clappered church or shuttered gas station, up where the road narrowed, switchbacked, and finally disappeared under packed snow. It was the kind of place no one visited without a reason. I'm Emily Sayer, 33, freelance illustrator, born in Athens, Georgia. I grew up quiet, one of those latchkey kids with a library card and a favorite flashlight. Solitude was something I never had to learn. I came wired for it. This trip wasn't supposed to be an escape. Exactly. More like a last push. I had a deadline. And when my friend Sadie offered her family's unused cabin near Roan Highlands, it sounded like a gift. 2 weeks off-grid. No calls, no errands. No one expecting anything. Just snow and time. The cabin wasn't big, just 2 rooms, a half-loft, and an old attic that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. It had a cast-iron wood stove and propane backups. A radio with a hand crank in the kitchen. I kept things simple. Wake up, draw for a few hours, make tea, sketch some more. I liked hearing nothing but wind outside. The storm had started the second night, and by day 4, the forest outside looked like it had been erased. That's when I found the boot prints. I'd gone out to check the porch for snow depth, hoping the storm might let up soon. The prints were big size 12, maybe, deep enough to be recent. They came straight toward the cabin, but there weren't any going back. I stood out there too long, staring at them. They didn't match my own boots, and they were wet. The snow inside the treads still melting a little. I told myself they were old. A delivery driver, maybe. The mail guy checking on the meter. I checked all the doors and windows. Everything was locked tight. On the 6th night, I was sketching near the loft railing when I heard something above me, a creak. Faint but definite. Not wind. A single shift of pressure on a board. The attic was directly above the loft. I waited. Nothing else. I climbed up, flashlight in hand. The attic trapdoor was low, set into the ceiling of the loft. When I opened it, a wave of cold air dropped down, much colder than the rest of the house. I scanned with the light. Just exposed beams and dust. Nothing moved. Still, I left the hallway light on that night. The 7th morning was clear. Cold. I went to chop kindling. I hadn't touched the wood pile since day 3. But it looked different. Neater. The logs were restacked tighter. Cleaner rows. Like someone had taken the time to arrange them. That night, the lights flickered. Just once. A long, dim pulse, and then back to normal. The cabin was off-grid. No reason for a flicker. I cranked the emergency radio and got nothing but wind and soft static. I didn't sleep much. Sometime past 3, I woke up to a sound from directly above me. A thump. Not a crash, just one heavy sound, like something being set down on the attic floor. I climbed up again. The trap door resisted a little this time, like there was pressure behind it. My flashlight beam hit the floorboards. There, placed right in the center of the attic floor, were a pair of boots. Wet, size 12. Not mine. They hadn't been there before. I didn't go back to bed. I pulled the trap door shut and dragged the heaviest armchair I could find across it. It didn't feel like enough. I pushed the kitchen table under the loft ladder. Locked every window twice. The cabin had never felt smaller. I found 2 old cans of spray paint in the shed, orange and black. I marked every door frame, every window latch, even the cabinet hinges' thin lines, so I'd know if anything moved. My brain needed patterns. Proof. Then I cranked the emergency radio again. Desperate for a voice. Static rolled for a full minute, then, just once, a voice punched through garbled "male." It said only a few words. "Don't go to the woodpile again." I froze. Nothing else came through. I tried for an hour. Silence. I turned all the cabin lights on and sat with my back to the stove, watching the front door. The snow let up that afternoon. Clear sky. I considered hiking down, but when I went to get my boots from the entryway, nothing. Not moved, gone. I hadn't left them outside. I checked every room. No prints. Just gone. That night, I scattered flour across the cabin floor. Every room, even the bathroom tiles. I lay down, fully dressed, with a flashlight in my hand. Didn't sleep so much as blink out. When I woke up, the clock said 3:12 a.m. In the flour footprints, bare, human. They led from the attic hatch to the bathroom door. Then they stopped. No return prints, no side tracks. Just vanished like the person had never turned around. Then I heard it creaking. Not above this time, inside the walls, like a crawl space I didn't know was there. I backed into the kitchen, heart thudding, then silence. I crawled into the laundry cupboard, pulling the door shut slowly. It was barely big enough to fit me. My knees pressed to my chest. I kept the flashlight off. Footsteps, soft, closer, then breathing. Slow, human. Right outside the thin cupboard door. I held my breath, didn't move. The breathing stopped. Then a single finger, dragging slowly down the seam of the cupboard door, from top to bottom. In the morning, I checked every spray-painted mark. All of them were gone. Not just moved, wiped completely clean. The boots were back in the attic, but not the same. They were dry now, and smaller, my size. When I found my sketch pad open on the table, I thought maybe I'd left it that way. But the page wasn't mine. I never drew that. It was a poem, scrawled in uneven lines. "Don't lock the attic tonight. I'll be quiet." The road twisted down into the valley like it didn't want to be found. Both sides of the narrow gravel track were lined with bare trees and soaked underbrush, the kind that looked like it'd pull at your tires if you stopped too long. Fog hovered at hood level. I hadn't seen another car in at least 20 minutes. I'm Jonah Wynn, 35, recently laid off from a logistics firm that didn't survive the winter. No wife, no kids, no plan. I rented a farmhouse I found through some sketchy local cabin site, no reviews. Just 3 blurry photos and a caption that read, "Pre-war stone foundation. Full kitchen, valley quiet." That last part stuck with me. Quiet sounded good. Cell signal dropped about a mile before I arrived. The drive ended in a bend where the forest pulled back, revealing a house that felt older than anything I'd seen in years. 2 stories, wide porch, half-rotted swing, bigger than the pictures, bigger than I needed. The air smelled like thawing earth and wet pine. Wind in that valley didn't move like normal wind. It squeezed sideways between ridgelines, low and constant. I parked, grabbed my bag, and let myself in with the code they emailed. Everything creaked. The floorboards, the hinges, even the air felt tired. Right inside the door, I noticed the stairs. Not the main ones going up, these led down. Carved from stone, exposed and open without any door, such as just a gap yawning into dark. The listing hadn't mentioned a basement. I stepped close enough to look. Cold air drifted up, damp but clean. What stood out, though, was the silence. When I dropped a coin down, it landed soft, no echo. I slept upstairs that first night, locked the front door, lit a fire in the cast iron stove, and left it at that. Sometime around 3, I woke to a dull scrape like a chair being dragged slowly across the floor. But not upstairs. Below, deep, muffled, like through thick carpet or water. I waited. It didn't come again. The next morning, I made coffee and, against better judgment, went down to check. The basement was unfinished but dry, with old shelves and a broken table. In the far corner, partly hidden behind a support beam, was a second staircase, this one made of wood. Narrow, steep, leading further down. There was no switch, no bulb, just darkness past the 3rd step. I didn't go down. That night a storm rolled in. Rain started around 7 and turned to hail by 9. Wind slammed the siding like it wanted in. The power flickered once, then went out. I lit a lantern and grabbed my flashlight. That's when I saw it. A single shoe print, right in the middle of the hallway rug. Small, bare, toes pointed toward the basement stairs. I hadn't taken my shoes off since I got there, and I was the only one in the house. No. I dragged the kitchen table over and wedged it tight against the stairwell, grabbed every chair and boxed it in. Then I slept on the couch with the fire going low and my flashlight resting on my chest. In the morning, I packed everything fast. I was ready to leave, storm or not. But when I walked out to the gravel bend where the road began, I stopped cold. The creek had jumped its banks. Water rushed over the narrow road, thick and high, turning the only exit into a muddy spillway. I wasn't going anywhere until Sunday. I went back in and started checking drawers, cabinets, closets. I don't know what I was looking for. Maybe something to explain the print. Maybe just to feel like I was doing something. One of the low drawers by the stairs stuck. Inside was a notebook, yellowed and swollen with age. Most of it was weather notes, lists of tools, measurements. But the final page was different. One line only. Don't open the second stairs. It knows your voice now. That night, I didn't speak. No podcasts, no music, no muttering to myself. I moved slow and quiet, as if the house had ears. I counted down the hours, just 2 more nights. But at 11:45, while brushing my teeth with the water running, I heard it. My own laugh. Not close, but not far either, coming from under the floor. It was exact. The same short burst I'd made earlier in the evening while reading a dumb joke on my phone. I froze, toothbrush still in my mouth. It came again, fainter. I ran for the door, but it wouldn't open. Not stuck, just wouldn't unlatch. The mechanism turned, but the bolt didn't move, like there was never a lock there at all. I grabbed the lantern and bolted upstairs. Tried the windows sealed. Every one. Screwed shut from the outside. Then came the knocking. Measured, steady inside the walls. 3 knocks, pause. Then 3 more from upstairs. I wasn't alone anymore. I don't remember what happened next. Just fragments. Cold steps. A voice that sounded like mine but didn't feel like it came from me. When the search team found me Monday morning, I was sitting at the top of the basement stairs, mumbling the same thing over and over. I didn't open it. It opened on its own. They took me out in a blanket into it all. Said the place was dry, undisturbed. No footprints but mine. No damage. Just dust and stone. Later, a deputy went back to look at the second staircase I described. He found it sealed. Not boarded, not hidden. Sealed in stone as if it had never been there at all. The last thing they did before I left the station was take my phone, then my smartwatch. The woman at the front desk smiled like she'd seen 100 twitchy people like me before tech stiffed. Eyes darting like we were missing phantom notifications. "You'll thank us by day 2, she said, and handed me a key and a small canvas bag with a journal inside. The paper kind. I'm Mark Tran, 29, software engineer, burnt out, according to my manager, depressed, according to my therapist. They both agreed I needed a break. So I signed up for this device-free retreat cabin in a private holler somewhere in the Blue Ridge foothills, North Georgia, the kind of place that doesn't show up on GPS by design. The cabin sat low in a fog pocket. No neighbors, just trees and crickets and the distant wheeze of summer cicadas. They'd told me I'd have only one device, a solar-powered laptop. No internet. No ports. Nothing but a stripped-down journaling program. Just for typing out your head. The brochure said. I was fine with that. I wasn't here to work. The place had a wood stove, water pump, and LED lights that clicked on automatically at dusk. Off-grid, but not uncomfortable. It felt like a summer camp for adults who forgot how to be bored. I unpacked, started the fire, and made myself a cup of tea from the supplies they'd left. The quiet felt artificial at first, like holding your breath, but eventually. It sank in. That first night, I sat at the small desk by the window and opened the laptop. It booted fast, almost too fast. Black screen. Then a beige interface like a digital typewriter. No icons, no settings. Just a blinking cursor and a top bar that said Journal V3. 7. I hadn't typed more than a sentence when the screen flickered. Just a blip, then a message appeared in the top left corner. Welcome back, Mark. Session resumed. I frowned. I hadn't opened the program before. This was my first night. No one else was supposed to have used this machine. I hit escape. Nothing. The message disappeared after a few seconds. I typed a few thoughts about the road in, about the fog, just enough to make it feel like I was trying. Then I went to bed. The next morning, I opened the laptop again. The cursor blinked where I left off, but something was wrong. When I scrolled up, I saw older entries. Titled, Dated, written in my tone, my rhythm, but I hadn't written them. The entries described things I hadn't done. One read Day 2, noticed someone watching from tree line. Another, shorter one, simply said, don't check the mirror again. I checked the system clock, August 14th, 2024. A year ahead. The battery panel was sealed with tamper tape. I tried prying it, but it wouldn't budge. I flipped the lid down, left it on the desk, went outside to sit on the steps and breathe. The fog had lifted slightly, but the forest still pressed in. That night, just after sunset, I sat at the desk again, trying to journal normally, force a return to structure, but the screen glitched, then froze. For a full 10 seconds, it stayed black. Then a live feed flickered on, black and white. It showed a man at a desk. This desk, same room, same window frame. He was wearing my shirt. He was typing, but when he paused, his reflection in the screen didn't. It kept moving. I slammed the laptop shut and carried it out onto the porch, left it there on the table under the lantern light, and closed the door behind me. I didn't touch it again, just wrote in the paper journal, listened to the wind, tried not to look at my own reflection in the dark windows. Around 1:12 a.m., the LED lights flickered. All of them, kitchen, bathroom, even the porch light. Just a quick pulse, like the cabin had blinked. The solar system wasn't supposed to do that. I checked the porch. The laptop was gone. When I turned back around, it was on the table inside. Open, screen glowing. A new entry had appeared. Mark attempted deletion, session reinstated. You left the door cracked again. I backed away and pushed the door shut until the latch clicked. Moved the bookshelf in front of it. Slept in the kitchen with my head on the counter and the fire dying down. No more screens, no more typing. The morning felt normal, bright. Still, I even made coffee and convinced myself maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. Until I opened the fridge to grab some powdered creamer. Taped to the back wall was a printed sheet. Smooth paper, laser inked. Do not type what you can't prove. I stared at it for a long time. By that afternoon, something changed. It wasn't fear anymore. It was curiosity. Like I had to know how deep the script went. Whether it was reading me, reacting, or something worse. I opened the laptop again. Hands shaking. Type just one line, I am leaving now. The screen went blank for a few seconds. Then it answered, are you sure you're the one who wrote that? I typed, yes. It replied, then prove what else you didn't write. The screen scrolled back on its own. Entry after entry. Some I remembered. Some I didn't. I had to go through line by line, deleting every sentence that didn't match what I knew I'd said or thought. Every fragment that felt off. That twisted reality just slightly. The final entry read, Mark never left. I deleted it. The screen went black and stayed that way. I left the cabin right after. Hiked back to the check-in station. No one was there. Just a wooden counter and a slow fan. When the clerk finally returned, I asked if they had my name down. She frowned, checked the paper log, shook her head. No mark this weekend. Just one laptop checked out, but it's a test model. Journaling AI. Never left the box. A week later, back home, a package arrived. No return label, plain cardboard. Inside the same laptop. Power light blinking. Session 2 now open. When you're 10, being alone feels like a game. At least it did to me. Back then, like I was pretending to be grown up. The fridge had notes on it. The TV was mine for a whole weekend. And Mom had even left a slice of pecan pie with my name written on the foil. It was 2 days after Thanksgiving. And she had to take my little sister to the hospital over in Roanoke. Sudden fever. Scary high. We didn't have family nearby, so she'd arranged for Miss Reddy, an older woman from up the hill, to come check in on me. She's real sweet, Mom said, zipping up her coat that morning. Used to work at the school back in the 80s, but when we stopped at her place, the lights were off. No car, a note on the door that just said, "Be back soon." Mom looked tired. Her eyes did that thing where they got shiny, but she tried to smile anyway. "You'll be okay. Lucas, call the firehouse if anything happens. I'll be back by Sunday night." And just like that, I was standing in our front doorway with a key and a checklist and the whole weekend ahead. The house was quieter than usual. Snow covered most of the yard, and the trees out back were bare and still. The old orchard behind our place dipped downhill rows of crooked trees and a stacked stone wall way at the edge where the property line faded. I'd seen it 1,000 times. It was just part of the view. That first night, I microwaved the casserole, watched a VHS of Homeward Bound, and wrote down everything I did on Mom's checklist. I felt brave, responsible. When it got dark, I turned on the porch light and peeked out the back window like I always did before bed. That's when I saw her. A lady, standing still near the stone wall. She wore a red coat, long down to her knees, but no shoes, just bare feet, half sunk in snow. She wasn't moving, not waving, just watching. I stepped back, closed the curtain, and stood there until my heart slowed down. Maybe it was Miss Reddy. Maybe she'd gotten confused or came down the hill to check on me. But I didn't go back to the window. I locked the back door, brushed my teeth, and tried to forget about it. The next morning, I almost believed I'd imagined her. The snow was still there, crusted over now, and the orchard was empty. Until I opened the front door to get the mail. There were footprints, wet ones, bare. They started at the edge of the porch, led to the door, but none going away. I stayed inside after that. Didn't call the firehouse, didn't eat much. The house felt heavier, like when you know someone else is in a room, even if they're quiet. That afternoon, I heard tapping. Not the knocking kind, more like fingernails against the siding. I looked out the kitchen window. The lady was closer now, just past the garden fence, still in the red coat, still barefoot. But she was wearing my sister's scarf, purple, with a little patch Mom had sewn onto the end. I knew I hadn't left it outside. That night, I locked every door, even the door to the laundry room. I dragged a chair into the hallway and sat there with my back against the wall, holding one of Dad's old baseball bats. It was quiet for hours. Then the walkie-talkie crackled. I hadn't touched that thing in 2 years. It had been stuffed in my toy bin under old board games. I didn't even know it still had batteries. Her voice came through soft, kind, like someone reading a bedtime story. "Lucas, honey, your mama said I could come in now." That was the end of pretending I wasn't scared. Mlon. I jammed every chair I could find against the front and back doors, pulled the kitchen table in front of the hallway entry, and pushed the recliner on top of that. I had my bat, a flashlight, and a half box of granola bars. Every light in the house stayed on. The walkie crackled again, just a whisper this time. "You dropped your scarf again." I looked down. I wasn't wearing a scarf. I turned off the lights one by one. Sat in my closet with a blanket over me, the bat across my lap, the walkie at my feet. I didn't fall asleep, not really, just dozed and jerked awake every time the wind shifted. "Around 3 a.m., her voice returned. "It's cold out here. You shouldn't leave guests outside." The words were wrong, but the tone wasn't. It sounded like my mom, like her voice trying to get me to open the door after forgetting her keys. The second night was worse. The snow kept falling. No new footprints, like she didn't need to walk anymore. I ate one granola bar, tried to read a comic book. Every noise made me grip the bat tighter. When morning finally came, it was quiet, like after a big storm. White covered everything. The orchard looked peaceful again. I stood at the back window, watching. Nothing moved. Then I heard it. "Lucas, I'm back. It's okay now." It was my mom's voice. From the front porch. I ran to the door, hand on the lock, but then the walkie crackled behind me. "That's not your mama, sweet boy." I bolted. Out the back. Into the snow. The wind stung my face, and I slipped twice before I hit the orchard edge. The lady was at the tree line. Then she moved. Fast. She ran when I ran. Her coat didn't flap. Her feet didn't crunch the snow. She made no sound at all. I tore down the slope, past the broken fence, skidded through frozen leaves, and ducked behind the old root cellar. There was a ditch deep enough to hide in. I lay there, pressed flat, breath burning in my throat. She passed right above me, still barefoot, still silent. She was wearing my winter coat now. I don't remember how I got home. I think I slept in the pantry. Mom said she found me curled up, door locked from the inside. She never left town. Said the hospital didn't even admit my sister. Said she never heard of Miss Reddy. Said that house up the hill had been empty since before I was born. A week later, I checked the back window again. Just snow, just orchard, just the wall. But stuck between two stones at the base, my old walkie-talkie, still turned on. The fog had rolled in early that week, thick and low, clinging to the ridge like it meant to stay. By Tuesday morning, I couldn't even see the wood line. The glass in the back door stayed misted over, and the wind had a muffled edge, like it didn't want to carry too far. Inside, the house was cool and still. Not silent, no, never silent. These old walls creaked and settled like bones, but lately, they'd started doing it at the wrong times, in the mornings, before I moved. Like something else had gotten up first. I'm Francis Meldon, 72 this past February, widowed 10 years now. I live alone in the house my husband built board by board, nail by nail, on a patch of smoky mountain slope most people would call too far out. We always said we'd die here. Well, he did. I stay. Grocery deliveries come twice a month. I talk to the ham radio crowd on weekends. Stack firewood by season. I know the rhythm of this house better than I know the wrinkles on my own hands. So when I opened the pantry that morning and saw what I saw, I didn't panic. Not yet. It wasn't my pantry. The shelves were in the same place. But that's where it ended. The wallpaper, a faded floral pattern I'd never seen before, covered the back wall. My blue gingham had vanished. There were jars I didn't can, unlabeled, clouded with something pale and stringy. On the floor sat a pair of leather gloves, neatly folded, brown, stitched along the edges the way men's gloves used to be. I stared for maybe 5 seconds, shut the door, locked it without thinking, stood in the kitchen and listened to the fridge hum. That afternoon, I opened it again. Blue gingham, my shelves, my jars, canned corn, pickled okra, no gloves. I nearly laughed. Told myself it was nothing, eyes playing tricks. Maybe. But when I turned around, something small and sharp slid into place in the back of my mind. The wicker chair by the back window. I hadn't seen that thing in years. We got rid of it, I remembered clearly, after one of the legs split and nearly sent Bert tumbling backward. Yet there it sat, good as new. Same faded cushion, same spot, like it had never left. I checked the basement. I don't know why, maybe just to be sure the world hadn't shifted there. 2, it smelled normal. Cold, dry concrete. A little mildew by the boiler. But there were footprints on the floor. Not boot prints, not socks. Bare feet. Broad, flat, deep enough in the dust to be recent. They led toward the pantry wall and stopped. "Na bien que chao," said. That night, I didn't go upstairs. I stayed on the couch, wrapped in a wool blanket, the fire ticking low behind the screen. Before I lay down, I dragged the big bookcase in front of the pantry door and poured a thick line of salt across the seam. Not for protection, exactly just to feel like I was doing something. I'd lived in this house nearly 50 years, and not once had I ever feared a room. But now, I watched the pantry like it might breathe. I started leaving notes, not out of forgetfulness, but to anchor myself. Scrap paper, old envelopes, margins of crossword puzzles. I wrote things like, "My name is Francis. There is one pantry. You don't know anything." I stuck them on the fridge, by the bed, the bathroom mirror. I needed the reminders to stay solid. The next morning, they were gone. Not moved, not crumpled, just gone, like they'd never been there. In their place, a single note sat dead center on the kitchen table. My own handwriting, sharp and careful, the way I wrote checks. "Francis, we're waiting." I didn't eat. I didn't speak. I just sat in the silence of my house while the clock ticked too slow. I thought about calling someone, anyone, but when I reached for the keys by the back door, the hook was empty. I checked the junk drawer, the freezer jar, even my sewing basket. Every key I'd ever hidden was gone. So I walked. I headed past the woodshed, past the brush line where the yard drops toward the ridge. Fog was still heavy, but looser now, soft around the edges. That's when I saw it. Another house, not 100 feet off. My house, down to the porch swing, The gutter rust, the curtain I'd stitched in. 85. But one difference, 2 chimneys. Mine has one. Always has. I didn't approach. Just stood and watched it while the wind moved between us like breath. Then I turned and went home. That evening, I lit a single lamp and sat in the rocker with a fire poker across my knees. The air felt wrong, like pressure before a storm. At some point, I heard it. Movement behind the pantry wall. Slow, deliberate, like footsteps on old linoleum. The temperature dropped so fast I saw my breath. Then came a sound I hadn't heard in days, the pantry door opening. It didn't creak, it clicked. She stepped out. She looked like me, not now, but 30, maybe 40 years ago. Same dark braid, same slight stoop in the left shoulder. She wore my old robe, the one I burned when Bert died. Her eyes locked onto mine. She moved faster than I thought she could. I backed into the stove, heart slamming, grabbed the fire poker with both hands. She reached for me, not menacing, not kind, just claiming. Her fingers closed around my wrist, warm, firm, real. I swung. The iron hit hard. The sound rang in the bones of the house. She staggered back and disappeared before she could fall. Gone. Except for the gloves, folded on the floor like they'd never moved. I was 9 that summer, and it was the first time Mom trusted me to stay home alone at night. She worked hospital shifts over in Clayton, 12 hours at a time, and said I was responsible enough now, as long as you don't burn anything or let Misty out. So each night, it was just me, a microwave dinner, and the rule sheet taped to the fridge. I wasn't scared, not really. We had soft carpet, cartoon bowls, and Misty slept by my feet like she always had. And I had Wendy. She wasn't real. I guess not like Misty or the mailman or the neighbor who waved when he mowed, but I talked to her more than I talked to anyone else. She was quiet in the daytime, only showed up when it got late. She said she lived underneath, that she stayed in the crawl space because it was cool and dark, and she didn't like the way the lights felt on her skin. I used to think that meant she was a bug or a ghost, but I didn't ask. It felt rude. Our house wasn't big. 1 floor, hallway down the middle, bedrooms at the end. The crawl space hatch was in the hall closet, a thick wooden square with a metal latch. Mom always told me not to mess with it. There's nothing under there but pipes and cold dirt. She'd say, keep it shut tight or we'll get mildew. So I never opened it. But Wendy came up from there. She said it was a Thursday night when it happened. I'd brushed my teeth, rinsed the sink like Mom showed me, and was halfway to my room when Misty stopped in the hallway. She let out a low growl, not barking, just warning. I turned to look where she was staring. The closet door was cracked, and the crawl space hatch inside it was open an inch. I stepped closer, just enough to see that it wasn't my imagination. The hatch had been pulled up slightly, maybe something was wedged under it. But I didn't see anything. Misty wouldn't come near it. She stood frozen, with the hair on her back raised. I tried pushing it closed, but it felt wrong, heavy, like someone was pushing back, gently. I left it. That night, Wendy talked more than usual. Not out loud, just in that quiet, thinking way she had. She said Misty didn't like her, that Misty would get in the way. She said the lights upstairs were too bright, that they hurt. I turned off the hallway light. The house felt colder after that. Still, like the kind of quiet you get when someone's waiting. Then the whispers started. Not words, just tiny, crackling sounds like someone talking through a closed mouth, deep inside the walls. I told myself it was the pipes, even though they never sounded like that before. I curled up in bed with Misty pressed against my legs. She didn't bark, just stared at the closet down the hall, even with the door closed. That's where I was wide awake at 1:14 a.m. when Misty finally lost it. She lunged up, barking full force toward the hallway closet. I grabbed her collar to pull her back, but in the next second she froze. Just stopped, legs stiff, breath silent. And in that silence, I saw it. The fingers, curled around the edge of the hatch door. Small, pale, not mine. "Na bien kichao," said. I yanked Misty by the collar and dragged her into my bedroom. Heart thudding so loud I could barely hear my own breath. Slammed the door shut, twisted the lock, and shoved my toy chest against it just in case. Misty stayed stiff for a second longer, then collapsed to the floor like someone hit her off switch. Her eyes stayed open, though, watching the bottom of the door. Wendy didn't talk for a little while after that. When she did, her voice felt different. Not mad, not loud, just disappointed. Like how Mom sounded when I forgot to rinse my plate. "You said we'd play," Wendy whispered in my head. "You promised." "That's mean, Harlan." I didn't answer. Just turned on every light in the room, even the closet one. Grabbed my plastic baseball bat from the corner and sat in the corner. Legs pulled up, back against the wall. The lights hummed over me like a blanket. Too bright, too hot. But they felt safe. Then they started going out. Not all at once, one by one. Like someone walking slowly under each bulb. The hallway first, then the bathroom, then the one just outside my door. I could feel them blink, even before I saw the change in shadow. Wendy didn't like lights. For a while, nothing happened. Maybe an hour, maybe more. I started to wonder if I'd made it all up, if the fingers were a dream, if the hatch wasn't even open. Misty stayed quiet, but she didn't sleep. Eventually, I opened the door a crack, just enough to peek out. The closet looked normal. The hatch looked closed now. I almost believed it. Then I heard it. Not Wendy's voice. Breathing. Low, soft, just under the sound of the air conditioner. It came from under my bed. Slow in, slow out, not snoring, not mine. I dropped to my hands and knees and lifted the sheet. Nothing. Except a single line drawn across the carpet in purple marker. No lights past this line. My throat went dry. I didn't cross it. Just backed up, turned off my lamp, and ran for the linen closet in the hallway. It was just big enough to fit me. I pulled the door shut behind me. Bat in hand, breath shallow. Wendy's voice came again, closer now, not angry, sad. "You said I could come up tonight," she whispered. "You said you wouldn't tell her." The floor creaked outside the closet. One slow step, then another. The knob shifted slightly, just enough to click. Then her voice again, right next to the door. "We can both fit in here, just for one night." The door creaked open an inch. I held my breath, didn't move. not even when her shadow slid across the crack of light. Then Misty barked, loud, once, and the hallway filled with a sound I don't have words for, like wind, but sharper, like wood snapping underwater. Then silence. The door never opened all the way. When I finally fell asleep, I was still holding the bat, and Wendy didn't speak again. I'm Tess Allard, 41, divorced almost 3 years when I bought the farmhouse. After leaving teaching, I'd flipped 2 houses near Boone, both clean projects. Safe bets. This one, though, was a stretch. Farther into the mountains than I liked. Isolated. But the listing price was stupid low for the square footage. And I needed one more sale before winter. I told myself the quiet would be good for focus, a weekend alone, just cleaning and planning. The house sat behind an old orchard gone wild, vines strangling half the trees. Fence posts rotted down to ankle height. The gravel drive curled uphill like it regretted the climb. The house itself had a sag to the left, like it had exhaled too hard one year and never recovered. Original siding. Gutters warped. Front steps spongy underfoot. But the bones were good, and I'd dealt with worse. Inside, it smelled like old paper and time. The top floor was worst mothballs, mildew, that thick wool sweater damp that never leaves old insulation. One narrow hallway ran along the upper level. All 3 bedrooms tucked to the right. The floor sloped just slightly, like the house was leaning into the mountain. The kind of subtle unbalance you notice more in your feet than your eyes. First afternoon. I went up with a notebook and tape measure. Dropped the tape by accident, it clattered across the floor. Slid under the door to the 3rd bedroom. I crouched, pulled it back, stood up quick. And the hallway looked longer. It wasn't dramatic. Just a flicker of space. But the 3rd door, the far one, seemed farther away than it had been. Like it had stretched when I wasn't looking. I stood there, staring down the hall, trying to remember how many steps it had taken me earlier. I couldn't recall, which bothered me more than it should have. That night, I made a nest downstairs sleeping bag, space heater, a little folding table near the back porch. It felt safer, less stale. I figured I'd hit the upstairs rooms in daylight when the air didn't feel so heavy. Everything was fine until just after midnight. I went up to grab my charger from the 2nd bedroom. The moment I stepped onto the upper landing, I noticed that the hallway was warmer. Not hot, just off. Denser. The air held still. Too still. Like the house was waiting for me to move. The boards creaked underfoot, but not where they had before. Different spots, no rhythm. I tested it twice. Same shoes, same weight, different sounds. I didn't sleep much after that. Next day, I brought up chalk, made a tiny X at the base of each door as I passed, added blue painter's tape, a note in each room, door closed at 11:03 a.m. I wanted control, wanted proof, but every time I came back up, the marks were different. Some gone, some faded, some moved. I started talking to myself. 1 hallway, 3 doors, 1 way in, 1 way out. It didn't help. Night 3. I needed my flashlight. It was still upstairs. I walked the same route, slow, steady. Repeated the mantra in my head. The air felt thick again. I passed the second bedroom and glanced left. Someone was standing at the end of the hallway, bent over slightly, reaching toward the floor, wearing my jacket, my boots. Frozen in the same posture I'd been in the first day, reaching for the tape measure. It was me, from the back. Still waiting, not moving. And the hallway behind her looked even longer than before. I didn't move. Not at first. Just stood there with my heart climbing into my throat. Eyes fixed on the back of my own body. Same jacket sleeve bunched at the elbow. Same mud splatter on the back hem from the orchard path. My double stood frozen, bent at the waist like the moment had been stretched thin and caught in amber. Then she shifted. Only slightly, her right shoulder dipped, like she was about to stand. I backed away, slow and silent, retracing my steps toward the stairs without turning around. I didn't want to see her face. Didn't want to know if she would look like me, or worse, not quite. I spent the rest of that night on the kitchen floor, flashlight in one hand, phone in the other. No bars, no signal. I taped every upstairs door shut with 3 layers, pushed furniture in front of the stairs, and scrawled one sentence across the living room wall in black marker. Don't go back the same way twice. It sounded like something I'd heard before, not a warning. Exactly. But a rule. By morning, the tape was still there. But one door upstairs stood wide open, the second bedroom. Inside, drawn neatly in chalk, were arrows pointing forward on each board, leading all the way to the third bedroom door. I didn't follow them, just closed the door, locked it, and turned every light in the house on. I started saying things aloud. I walked it once. I won't walk it again. This is the kitchen. This is the back door. The hall doesn't change if I don't watch it. It made no sense, but it felt right. I kept my voice steady, like I was anchoring something. It held for a while, until I realized I'd left my phone charger upstairs. I waited until full daylight, made coffee, paced the entire downstairs twice. Then I ran, sprinting up the stairs without looking at the walls, no breathing, no thinking. Grabbed the charger from the corner of the third room and bolted back down. I thought I'd done it clean. Thought maybe whatever this was only worked at night. But when I got back downstairs, everything felt mirrored. Subtle at first, the windows showed the orchard, but it was on the wrong side. The light from outside was too bright for morning, and the sun was rising through the west-facing window. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, turning in place, trying to breathe. That's when I saw the living room. It had 2 fireplaces. Mine only had one. I turned to run, reached for my overnight bag from the hook, and froze. At the start of the hallway stood a figure. Same jacket, same face, watching me. She didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. I didn't think. I dropped the bag, turned, and bolted through the kitchen, flung the back door open, and ran into the orchard, not caring what direction I went, just that it was away. As I reached the edge of the trees, I heard the front door creak open behind me. I didn't stop to see who or what was stepping through. The couple who rented me the cottage were kind but distant. They handed me the keys, gave me a quick tour, then said the one thing I remembered most. No basement. Everything's on one floor. I was too tired to ask why they made a point of it. It was late January, and I had a week of solo work ahead recording winter bird calls. mapping old trails near the ridge, collecting soil samples before the next freeze. My name's Mira Janssen, 34, field biologist. Used to being alone in cold places. The house was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, narrow kitchen, low ceilings that creaked when the wind pressed in. The fireplace was gas, controlled by a wall switch. And the heat it threw was thin, but constant. Snow had piled high along the backside of the hill. And I didn't see another house the entire drive-in. No neighbors. No reception unless I hiked half a mile toward the ridge. That was fine. I liked the quiet. Only one thing felt off at first, the vent in the living room. Every now and then, it would click twice a sharp, metallic sound, like something tapping the underside of the grate. Not air pressure, not normal, just a double tap, then silence. At first, I thought maybe the ductwork was settling. But it didn't match the rhythm of the fan. That night, around 11:40 p.m., I heard footsteps beneath the floorboards, not scurrying, not mice, heavier, pacing, back and forth, 5 or 6 steps, then pause. Then again, I stood in the center of the living room, holding my breath, trying to convince myself I was hearing the house adjust to the cold. But the steps had weight, rhythm, like someone trying to walk quietly without being too quiet. I grabbed my flashlight and checked the crawlspace panel out back. It was bolted, locked, sealed shut with a padlock. No footprints in the snow nearby. I knocked on it once, just to be sure. Silence. But as I turned to go back inside, I heard something from the floor vent. A whisper. It was my voice. I think someone's under the house. Soft, clear, just like I'd said it to myself 10 minutes earlier. I rushed inside, heart slamming, and turned off the fireplace fan. The room fell silent, except for the hiss of the gas line cooling. I leaned down to the vent. Another whisper. Same pitch, same tone, but the words weren't mine anymore. They were wrong, out of order. A sentence that ended in a question I'd never asked. Like someone had pulled a thread from my voice and was trying to stitch something new from it. I didn't sleep. Not really. At 2:14 a.m., the vent clicked again, sharp and fast, like fingers drumming. Then came a sound that turned my spine to ice, the drag of something heavy across concrete. Not inside the house, underneath it. I dropped to the floor, pressed my ear to the boards. From beneath, barely audible. A whisper, "We're here too early." Hide now. I backed away from the vent slowly, palms flat to the floor. Keeping my weight low like that would make a difference. Whatever was underneath me didn't move again. No voices, no dragging. Just that final whisper replaying itself in my mind. We're here too early. I didn't know what it meant or who he was. I just knew I wasn't going back to sleep. I piled every rug I could find over the floor vents, layered towels on top, moved the dining chairs and end tables to weigh them down. Then I closed every interior door in the house, one by one, listening for anything that might respond. Nothing did. Still, I sat by the fireplace with my boots on and my coat zipped, flashlight in one hand, keys in the other. If anything moved again, I was ready to run, to drown out the sound of the vents. I turned the fireplace fan back on high setting, It filled the room with a soft hum, constant and harmless. I focused on that. Let it become a blanket. But just as I was starting to settle, something thumped directly under the couch. Hard enough that I felt it in the soles of my boots, like a fist slamming the underside of the floor. Misty silence followed. Nothing else touched the vents. Nothing creaked. No more voices. After nearly an hour of holding still, knees drawn to my chest, I let myself lean against the wall. Sleep came fast, sharp, heavy, the kind of sleep that only happens when your body crashes before your brain can stop it. I woke up to cold. The fire was out. The fan was still running, but it blew only room temperature air now. I sat up, disoriented, and checked the thermostat. A red blinking message glared back. System error, basement zone disabled. There was no basement. I stood fast, eyes scanning the room. Something felt off. Shifted. I looked toward the dining table, toward the rug beneath it. The rug I hadn't moved since I got there. It was crooked. I stepped closer, edged it back. Beneath it, flush with the floorboards, was a trap door. 4 screws sat loose around its corners, as if they'd been removed gently and set aside. The door itself was still barely ajar, just a hair, enough to show darkness below. I didn't think, just ran. Bolted for the front door, fumbled with the lock, flung it wide. And it slammed shut in front of me. The vent behind me whispered, "Not her, not yet." I turned, heart pounding, and scanned the room. I had seconds, maybe less. I grabbed the mirror off the hallway wall heavy, backed with wood, and hurled it at the floor near the hatch. The glass shattered like a scream, echoing down into the open space below. Beneath the house, something reacted. Heavy, stomping footsteps rushed toward the sound, not echoing, but muffled, fast and direct. I bolted sideways, toward the utility door near the back. It stuck, then gave, just as I heard the hatch behind me click closed. Not slammed, just gently shut. Outside, the wind howled up from the valley. I didn't look back, not once,